Our next speaker, Laura Meixell from the city of Pittsburgh. We're excited to have her. Laura is the Analytics and Strategy Manager. She just recently came back to the Pittsburgh area, spent some time in Washington, D.C. We will not hold that against her. Just working with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I think for a unique perspective in what, more locally or in the particular public sector, Laura, definitely can provide that. So I want to welcome her to the stage. Laura Meixell, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Microphone, all right. So everybody, thanks for coming out. So the presentation that I'm about to give is a modified version of a presentation that my partners at the University of Pittsburgh and I recently gave to some of our local foundation partners. And we're really excited about some of the projects that we've got going forward. But do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer that some of these slides have like way too much text on them because I adapted it from those presentations, so I'll try to go through those. But we've got some pretty interesting graphics here too, so let's get going. So this quote from Presley Gillespie, who is the president of Neighborhood Allies, which is a community group here in the city. And he said at the conference of the Pittsburgh Neighborhood and Community Information System this year that data will be for the 21st century what steam engines were for the 18th and electricity in the 20th. And I think that sort of understanding of data and of the availability of data as sort of infrastructure and as a public service on which on top of which other things get built is something that we take really seriously in the Peduto administration, and we sort of think about how we can provide some of that information technology in order for others to build on top of it the things that they need. So Pittsburgh is a city of neighborhoods, as we know. So one of the things I think that makes our community really unique from a lot of other cities is the fact that we have a really extraordinary network of people in neighborhood organizations, in community development organizations, in various advocacy groups who do all sorts of great work in all sorts of different parts of the city. We have that sort of infrastructure for a lot of reasons, one of which is our sort of very large and generous foundation community that we have here. That really means that we have some very high capacity, interested people who are working at these places and really sort of have the ability to, given the resources, take the next step and do some really evidence-based management and really try to further the mission of their public service organization using data and technology. We see them as a really major constituency for us and trying to help them to use data. So this is a little bit of a smattering of some of the groups that I was just sort of describing broadly. Part of what we've been trying to do in the last, we've been in office, almost like 11 months now, has been around trying to work with these groups and figure out what data that they use directly in program management for their mission is held by the city. So if you think about it, we've got every transaction that takes place with the city, when there's a record, we then have that data. So we've got stuff like crime statistics, we've got information about all sorts of information about real estate, building inspections, building permits, construction permits. We've got the history of all sorts of economic development projects that happen in our neighborhoods. We've got issues around service requests, 311 calls. We've got all of our road closures and sort of things that are important for routing and for logistics and service delivery. All those things, some of them with some sort of transformation around concealing personally identifiable information. But with that caveat, all these things are technically public information, and we want to find a way to deliver them to the public, and to deliver them to the public in a way that is most useful for them. So in addition to all these neighborhood groups that we've got working at the NGO level throughout our city, there are 132 municipalities in Allegheny County. I don't know, I'm not quite sure how much people in the private sector are aware of that, but that's bananas, right? Like, that's true in Pennsylvania and that's true in Ohio, but there's really not a lot of other places in the country where municipal fragmentation is this much of an issue. And municipal fragmentation here in Western Pennsylvania has been a challenge to all sorts of policy directives, literally for generations at this point. Some of you may remember sort of talk about consolidating the city and the county that took place 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. Nobody's even having those conversations now, okay? The political will is just sort of not there. But what we can do, sort of from the technologist perspective, from the policy and the program management perspective, is to think about how we can work on integrating some of the data in order to really enable cross-municipal service delivery. I mean, some of our major intractable problems that we have in this region, one of them that I hope most people are aware of, is the fact that our area has been under consent decree from the EPA since 2006 about our problems with our sewer overflow, right? So people know about this. We're now on the hook for something like $4 billion in repairs that have to take place in our watershed area. And there's no way that that's going to happen without sort of having that real solid infrastructure layer of information around where our pipes are, where our opportunities are, who's the owners, and how can we really use information to make this happen. So one of the reasons that this is an exciting time for us to do this now is the fact that we've got these guys in office. So everybody know who these people are? You've got County Executive Rich Fitzgerald and my boss, Mayor Bill Peduto. So, you know, at this point, we sort of have a mayor of the city of Pittsburgh and a county executive who get along really well, who are sort of who are definitely interested in solving some of these problems, and who both of which are interested in technology and trying to use as much evidence-based management as we can to attack some of these issues. So the more that, you know, people at my level and many others sort of on the policy implementation and operations side can get some of this data together now, can work on saying, here's where our problems are, here's the decisions that need to be made in a very, very sort of evidence-based way. Now that we've got them in place to sort of make the decisions and get the political will to get it rolling, that's why the urgency is now. So what I just want to talk to you guys about briefly is the plan that we have recently sort of set forth to do this. I came back to Pittsburgh just in January when the mayor came into office. We spent a lot of time, kind of, if anyone's ever put together a multi-organization grant proposal or a business plan, I'm sure you understand. There's just lots of going back and forth, but we're there and we're really excited about it. There's 3 components that we're going to talk about today. So very briefly, the first thing we're calling the Government Solutions Engineering Team. And what this is going to constitute is going to be people that we're going to hire to work directly for the city and the county to work on some of these data management issues which have been neglected now for years and years, and to really sort of be resources to tackle some of these major policy issues. The second element of this is the creation of a regional data resource center at the University of Pittsburgh. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And the third thing is that we are going to bring in support from an organization called Code for America, which is actually a place that I used to work, and we'll go into that too. So just to talk a little bit about the Regional Data Resource Center. So when most cities do open data, right? So I talked about a little bit about all the different kinds of data that the city maintains. When most cities do open data, and plenty of cities do across the country, they, as well as the state and federal government, but at the city level, very often what they'll do is they'll contract with a software as a service provider, put up a portal, which will have that data then available in those sort of documented, machine-readable formats that we're all looking for, which currently anyone who's looked at the city website knows that we are not currently doing that. But we're working toward it. So usually the city will put up this website, publish their own data to it, and say, great, let's call it a day. We've done open data here in the city. So what we're doing in the city of Pittsburgh is trying to go a little bit further than that and trying to really be a leader in the region, so going outside of Pittsburgh, but also being inclusive of the types of information that our various neighborhood groups have and a lot of our other government organizations. So what we're going to do, build this Regional Data Resource Center, going to be a platform that's actually hosted at the University of Pittsburgh, at the University Center for Social and Urban Research, which you may have heard about. I met a couple Pitt grads wandering around here before. UCSR, as it's called, the acronym for the University Center for Social and Urban Research, has been around since the 60s, has been a really important outlet for the University of Pittsburgh to provide true support for public service and for community organizations in the city of Pittsburgh. So we're really excited to partner with them. So the idea is that we're going to host data coming not just from the city, but also from the county. And we want to make it flexible and extensible enough that we can host open data really from anybody who wants to publish it. So we can host data from neighborhood groups who perhaps have information that they want to share, if they've done surveys, if they have historical information that they want to make available to the public. And we can also host data coming from some of these other 132 municipalities in Allegheny County. And we think that creating this sort of central one-stop shop to have all this information hosted is going to be a really important platform for doing a lot of that standardization and broader collection that we understand we need to do going forward in order to pursue a lot of these policy priorities. So some of the things that we see the Regional Data Resource Center doing, so first of all, it's going to manage the physical technical infrastructure of that portal. So we've got some ideas around sort of what a repository might look like. Like I said, there's all sorts of other cities and counties that are doing this across the country and as well as across the world. Actually, they've got a pretty neat one in Buenos Aires now. And so, we've got a lot to sort of learn from there in terms of what's useful and what's most interactive for folks, sort of at a variety of levels and reasons for accessing the information. So we'd also like our Regional Data Resource Center to do some sort of promoting, to do some of that community organizing. So, not only do we want to do this on the input side and work with organizations and municipalities to encourage them to participate and to contribute some of their data, but also to work with users, right? So I mentioned neighborhood organizations as being sort of a main constituency of ours in terms of trying to provide data for them to work on their projects. We also are interested in working with local developers to figure out what kinds of applications can be built on top of this data. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the context of Code for America, but we are absolutely interested in sort of creating APIs on some of this information and really presenting it in such a way that anyone who's interested in building applications on top of it, in sucking this information into pre-existing applications or other services that either a private citizen or a private sector company is interested in using. We want to make the data available for that. And we're also interested in working on data standards, right? So the sort of data standards conversation in the public sector has lots and lots of room to grow. Let's put it that way. I think we have a lot of catching up to do to the way that standards are used in the private sector. And I'm really excited about some of the opportunities for developing some of those things, both in terms of having municipalities communicate with each other, as well as being able to sort of bring that data in a standardized format into larger applications and services. So this is just a little bit of some of our, we call this the proven method slide when we're talking to the funders, and talking about some of the successes that have happened in other cities. So, one of the things that is actually very much ongoing right now is that we're looking at the way the city of Philadelphia treats its crime information. So there are actually the city of Philadelphia publishes that raw layer just of the crime information, and then there's something like 6 different websites that actually build on top of it all sorts of different visualizations, different time periods, some are map-based, some are list-based, and I just think it's a really interesting sort of ecosystem of applications and visualizations that occur on top. And so the last thing I'll talk about is Code for America. You might recognize somebody on that slide. So Code for America is a nonprofit that is based out in San Francisco, California. They are 5 years old now, and they work with cities and counties across the country to build technology that works for people through a variety of programs. So the sort of flagship program is the Fellowship. The Fellowship is a year of service program, sometimes referred to as the Peace Corps for Geeks. And it's sort of designed to have people generally from the Silicon Valley community, from like the San Francisco startup world, to do a year of service with a municipality or with a county government or a state government sometimes, to help them look at their problems and think about how technology can be a piece of the solution. They work in all sorts of different subject matter areas, from public safety to food security to parks and recreation. My team, I was a Code for America fellow last year in Louisville, Kentucky, working on criminal justice issues. Here in Pittsburgh, we are going to be focusing on procurement. Yeah. So next year we will be hosting 3 fellows in the city of Pittsburgh who will be coming here to help us develop applications and to think about the ways that the city buys things, right? So we spend tens of thousands of dollars every year on contracts, and the mayor wants us to think about how we can use technology to make that more transparent and to give small businesses more of a chance to participate in that environment. So as I mentioned, there were a couple different programs at Code for America, the fellowship program being the flagship. Another program is the brigade. So the Code for America brigades are volunteer groups. They're actually in more than 250 cities worldwide right now. People with technology backgrounds, generally people with sort of skills that they want to be able to use in the public service. So I want to talk a little bit about an example of an application here. So there was an application that was built in Boston by their Code for America brigade called Adopt a Hydrant. So they found that in the snow, when it snowed really deep, the hydrants were getting covered, and then their public works group and their firefighters were having to go around and dig out these fire hydrants in order to make the area safe so that if there should be a fire, they could come in with the fire trucks and do their job. But this was a job that was taking all sorts of time and effort from the municipality. So what the brigade did was they built an application whereby a citizen can adopt a hydrant and say, okay, this one's mine. They gamified it a little bit to say, you can name it if you dig it out. And then, because they had the open data of where the fire hydrants existed. So they built this game, and sure enough, people actually adopted the hydrants and dug them out themselves, got to name them, and they created this little community of people doing, in this case, a pretty minor public service operation, with this technology and this really small application. That application was then forked by the Honolulu Brigade, who built Adopt a Siren. So they're in Hawaii in general, they've got all these tsunami warning sirens. And apparently people take the batteries out of them randomly. And they do these tests, and they need people to listen and say, hey, did your siren blow during that test? So they did the same thing in order to make it more safe to live in Hawaii. So we've got our own brigade here now in Pittsburgh. We've been going for a couple months, and I think it's really exciting because we've got a whole bunch of people who are interested in building applications for us here in Pittsburgh. We've got this great opportunity to work with brigades from other cities. There's a huge GitHub presence for the Code for America brigades, and just a lot of opportunities to learn and to build new things in cooperation with people interested in civic technology all across the country and all across the world. So, one of the main things I was hoping from talking to this crowd is that somebody might be interested in joining us with Code for America. We've got a bunch of projects that are ongoing right now. We've got a bunch of things that are sort of coming down the pike. So pretty much any sort of interest, from developers to project managers to designers, we've got a place for you. So if you want to come up and talk to me later, I can take questions. We're on Twitter. We're standing up a website actually this week. Of course, I don't have, the URL's not locked down quite yet, but it will be. But you can always find us on Twitter. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Okay. So in terms of the skill sets that we're looking for with the Code for America Brigade, really anyone and everyone is welcome. We're absolutely looking for systems administrators. We need a lot of help with that and sort of the DevOps side of things.
Development?
Yeah, so developers, but really pretty much anyone. I mean, we've definitely got people who aren't even technologists in sort of the classic sense, but who are just sort of interested in open data advocacy, and interested in project management or community organizing.
Thank you.
much going on the hardware side right now, but we absolutely could. So if you're interested and you have a project that you want to try to get off the ground, there'd probably be people in the group who would be interested.
I know right now it's mostly being applied to infrastructure, but I have a real interest in it being applied to education and being able to, collect data on education. Is that something that you think that would happen in the future to see if we can improve the efficacy of our school districts?
Sure. So, we definitely hope that our school districts will want to participate in the Regional Data Resource Center going forward. So the way the government is sort of structured here in Pittsburgh, the city government and the county government are all actually pretty separate from the school districts. So functionally, me personally in my role, I don't have too much influence or involvement with the school district, but absolutely they would be invited to participate in this and to get involved in some of the initiatives that we hope we can get going forward, where we'll have some partnerships with our universities and with researchers who can sort of help to make more sense of that data.
Thanks. So I can see how other businesses and people might use data that was available about residents and the things that are going on in the city. I'm wondering, what are the plans for the city to use the data to attract and retain residents and businesses? Sure.
So the very first things that we are kind of going for with our data is just around service delivery and operations. I think that in the last, let's say 10 years, although it might be a little less, might be like 7 years, there really hasn't been too much of an eye on sort of accountability and around service delivery from some of our organizations. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to just get better at some of the very core things that we do. That involves things like trash pickup, that involves things like road maintenance, park maintenance, and those kinds of things. And so our first goal is to just sort of put some structure and accountability around those really central service delivery roles. So that's definitely, that's going to be the first term. I'll talk to me in the second term. Anybody else? All right.